Good morning, students. This is Ms. Tittle, and today we're going to be doing Inquiry 3.2. We're going to be determining the pulse rate of a blackworm. So let's take a moment before we start our lab and let's just check on our blackworms this morning. I'm going to switch over to the webcam view, and as we can see, they're kind of crawling around or swimming around in the water. Looks as if they're crawling because they move their bodies back and forth kind of like in a whip-like motion. And as you notice, some blackworms are small, some blackworms are a lot longer. Some of them like to clump up in a big group like we talked about on the last video. But I thought you would just get, or be glad to get just a quick view of them and what's going on in the classroom this morning. Okay, let's get back to our lab. And on Inquiry 3.2, you're going to be watching this video and then completing your lab report. So click Open Assignment with Cami to open your lab report. And on our lab report today, it says we're going to be determining the pulse rate of the blackworm. So our question is, how does blood flow through the body of a California blackworm? So for your hypothesis, you will be answering this question by saying blood flows through the body of a California blackworm by blank. So here in this blank space, I want you to tell me how you think blood flows through the body of a California blackworm. So I'll take just a second and give you time to think about that. You can pause the video and go to your lab report and go ahead and type that in if you would like to. And then you can come back to the video and continue after you've written your hypothesis. Okay, our materials for this lab are found on page 41 in the book, and our procedures are found on page 45 and 46. And as you can see, we're going to be collecting some data. So let's take a look. Let's flip over to the textbook and let's take a look at our procedures for Inquiry 3.2. Okay, some of these procedures we will be skipping because they're already done for us. But basically what we're going to be doing is looking at a blackworm that has been put on a slide or even on a petri dish on a piece of filter paper. And we're going to be putting the blackworm on the microscope stage on a power of 40x. And we should be able to see the blood moving through its blood vessel. Okay, now there are a few things that we're going to have to take a look at so that we make sure we have a consistent experiment. The variables involved in this investigation, of course, the blackworm could be moving. Different parts of the blackworm's body will have blood flowing at different rates. The head end of its body usually has blood flowing a lot faster than the tail end of its body. And just other variables like that will be going on. So we have got to make sure that we think about those variables and try to keep our experiment as consistent as possible. And so we're going to be gathering data about the pulse rate of our blackworm. We're going to be doing 3 trials and then finding the average. Each one of our trials we're going to count for 30 seconds, but then because our data needs to be pulses per minute, we'll take whatever the blackworm's pulse was for 30 seconds and multiply by 2, and that would of course give us how many pulses there were per minute. So before we do our trials, let's do a practice run. I have a pre-recorded video of the blackworm's pulse being calculated, and the first time through, before we do our trials, I'm going to show you how we're going to count the pulse of the blackworm, and then we will use the video and count the pulses for our 3 trials. So let me switch over to the video of the blackworm's pulse rate, and in this time around I'm going to mute the volume and I'm going to just show you how we're going to keep our variables as controlled as possible. Okay, so I'm going to hit play and just let you look and see. You see the blood moves through their body kind of in waves, And so what I'm going to do to keep this as consistent as possible, I'm going to pick a section. I'm going to pick this section right here in the middle, and I'm going to keep my eyes on that section. And every time one of those pulses of blood goes through that part of the blood vessel, I'm going to count it. So as you can see, it goes pretty slow, like that was 1, and so forth. It goes pretty slow. So if we just keep our eyes focused on one little section and count how many times the blood flows through there within 30 seconds, then we'll be able to collect our data. Okay, so if everybody's ready, we're going to be doing trial 1, and we're going to be watching that video clip of the blackworm's blood flowing through its blood vessel, and we're going to count how many pulses there are per minute. Okay, so if everybody's ready, we're going to do trial 1. Let me rewind and start. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I counted 4. So let's go back to our data table, and we would type in 4. Let me switch over to text box, and I'm going to put a 4 here. Oh wait, I forgot to multiply it by 2. I forgot. So 4 times 2 is 8. So it was 4 in 30 seconds, so that means per minute it would be about 8. Okay. So now we're ready to do trial 2. So let's go back to our video. And remember, we're keeping our eye just on one segment of the blackworm's body, and go. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I counted 4 again. We were getting close to having one more, weren't we? Okay, so 4 times 2 is 8. Okay, and let's do trial 3 just to make sure our results and our count is consistent. Okay. We could, I guess, technically count that first one, but since we haven't so far, this will be 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so 4. So let's go to our data table. Let me hit pause here. Let's go to our data table, and we have 8 again. Okay, so our average 8 3 times would be 24, divided by 3 would be 8. So our average is, of course, 8. So our average was 8 pulses per minute. So the blood moves pretty slow, but as you noticed, it moves in long pulses instead of those fast beats like us, because this blackworm does not have a heart to be pumping the blood. The blood moves because of those pulsations of its body, and its body movement helps to move the blood along. Okay, so after we're through collecting our data, we have our analysis, and since we're all doing the same video clip of pulse, since we are not at school and we're not all looking through it through the microscopes and counting our own, all of us should have the same average. So you could put, for number 1, you could just simply say that we all were viewing the same worm, so we all had the same pulse rate. Okay. Okay, what did you discover about the pulse rate of the black worm when it was measured at different parts of its body? Well, we didn't actually get to do that since we're doing this virtually. But if we were looking at the pulse rate of the black worm, then if we measured its pulse towards its head end of its body, it would be a lot faster than it would be at the tail end of its body. And think about reasons why that might be. Okay, and number 3, is the black worm's blood flowing freely inside of its body, or is it contained in a vessel? And number 4, what do you think is the purpose of the blood in the black worm's body? Think about what the purpose of blood is in our body, and it would be a very similar purpose. Okay, for your vocabulary, again, you see Lumbriculus variegatus. If you'll remember, that's the scientific name of the black worm. And then you have a couple of other vocabulary words that relate to this lab: pulse rate, blood vessels, and a closed circulatory system. So make sure you define each one of those. Then lastly, for your lab report, and I've been noticing that a lot of you are skipping the conclusion. The conclusion counts anywhere from 10 to 15 points of your grade, so please make sure you attempt the conclusion. In this lab, our conclusion is going to be describing how you think blood flows through the body of the black worm. So you can use our observations that we made of the blood flowing through the black worm's body from the video we watched, and us calculating its pulse rate. Use some of those as pieces of evidence when you're writing your conclusion. Remember, your conclusion should be a paragraph, at least 5 sentences long, and it should relate back to the claim we made in our hypothesis, the evidence we gathered in our data, and then any reflections or responses that you have in relation to that evidence that you saw. Okay, if you have any questions, please make sure you message me. I hope you're having a good day. Bye-bye.